was worth it, but by no means stopping the pro-choice members from our strategizing to move forward.
Congresswoman Jan Schakowsky, Democrat of Illinois, a strong supporter not only of choice but of health reform. Congratulations to you for what you've been able to do in your House, and thanks very much for staying up and talking to us. Really appreciate it.
Thanks, Rachel.
This weekend, as health reform chugged slowly into the station, after 60, 70, 100 years of debate, some folks in the country decided that debate is not for them. They decided they'd prefer to make their views known by demonstrations of force and threats of force and intimidation. Bricks were thrown through the windows and glass doors of 2 Democratic offices in western New York State, including on Friday the district office of Democratic Congresswoman Louise Slaughter in Niagara Falls, and over the weekend the Democratic Party headquarters in Rochester, New York. No one was injured in either attack. The damage to the Congresswoman's office is estimated at a few $100s. A similar incident took place in Arizona at about 2:40 a.m. last night, just a few hours after staff had left for the night after the vote. An alarm went off at the Tucson office of Democratic Congresswoman Gabrielle Gifford. Police found part of the office's front door and the glass panel alongside it smashed in. A spokesperson for the Congresswoman said it was unclear if the glass had been shot out with a pellet gun, perhaps, or if it had been kicked or smashed with an object. No one has claimed responsibility for any of those attacks. Meanwhile, inside the House of Representatives, things got pretty ugly as well.
Those who were shouting out are out of order.
Did you hear that? Baby killer? That did not come from a protester or someone in the gallery. That was someone on the House floor. That was a member of the United States Congress. And for a while today, we did not know who it was. But if Congressman You Lie Joe Wilson taught us anything, it's that you can't shriek like an affronted toddler on the House floor while the cameras are running and not eventually get found out. And so after a period of brave anonymity last night and early today, the slanderer in brief ultimately had to out himself. He is Republican Congressman Randy Neugebauer of Texas. Mr. Neugebauer admitted today that it was he who screamed baby killer during last night's health reform debate. But Randy Neugebauer also says when he screamed baby killer at Congressman Bart Stupak, he didn't actually mean to imply that Bart Stupak is a baby killer. No, why would you get that impression? What he says he meant was that health reform is a baby killer. The congressman apologized for the timing and tone of his comment. Timing and tone were the least of the problems with some of the behavior by anti-health reform protesters outside the U.S. Capitol building this weekend. For example, I don't know what is good timing or what's a more appropriate tone for threatening to stop health reform using guns. The sign from this weekend's protest at the Capitol reads, "Warning, if Brown," meaning Massachusetts Senator Scott Brown, "can't stop it, a Browning can." And in case you don't know that a Browning is a brand of gun, there's a handy photo of or picture of a gun on the sign to make the threat explicit to even the illiterate. When Congressman and civil rights hero John Lewis arrived at the Capitol on Saturday, an anti-health reform protester reportedly shouted a racial epithet at him, one too vile to be repeated on television. Congressman Emanuel Cleaver was also spat on by an anti-health reform protester after being called the same epithet. His office says the congressman elected to not press charges after Capitol Police detained and handcuffed the man who spat at him and took that man to the Capitol Police station. And as you heard me discuss earlier, when Congressman Barney Frank arrived at the Capitol on Saturday, a Politico.com reporter heard anti-health reform protesters shouting a homophobic slur at the congressman. It should be noted that despite the charm offensive from the anti-health reform protesters, who were cheered on by House Republicans this weekend, House Democrats chose on Sunday to march through the protesters on their way into the Capitol building. According to the Hill newspaper, the decision was made at the last minute at the end of a Democratic caucus meeting in a nearby office building. Led by House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, the group walked arm in arm right up the Capitol steps, right through them, unintimidated, to go do their jobs. Health reform has passed. President Obama will sign it tomorrow. It will be law. What's not done is reconciliation, the 153 pages of fixes to the Senate version of health reform. Senate debate begins on that tomorrow sometime after the president signs the overall bill into law. That leaves Republicans one more chance to dig themselves even deeper in against health reform. Sort of. Actually, the only thing left for Republicans to all vote against now is this comparatively small reconciliation bill to make health reform better. This is the bill that does things like taking the Nebraska Gets Special Treatment provision out of the legislation. You know, the Cornhusker Kickback? That's the thing that Republicans are opposing now. They are opposing taking the special treatment for Nebraska Cornhusker Kickback thing out of the bill, which is going to make it a little harder for those same Republicans to rail against health reform because of its sleazy backroom deals. Since when they got the chance to vote to take those deals out of the bill, they instead all voted to keep them in. It's a little like hosting a keg party to celebrate that you've quit drinking. As final passage of the bill gets closer and more inevitable, conservative Democratic strategy against reform is also getting wacky. As you know, I'm in Arkansas today, where Senator Blanche Lincoln has released a statement on health reform, saying, quote, "I am pleased that the House approved the Senate health insurance reform bill that I helped craft. Even with its imperfections, this bill represents the most morally and fiscally responsible approach to health reform." So more than just a yes vote, Senator Lincoln is now taking credit for the Senate bill. And she's also now pledging to vote against it becoming law, saying, quote, "The reconciliation package devised by the House employs a legislative process that wasn't subject to the same transparency and thorough debate that we used in the Senate. I cannot support this process." So Blanche Lincoln voted for the bill in December and will now vote against it becoming law. Not on its merits, but because of a process concern, thus casting a vote both for health reform and against health reform, which means that of the population that cares one way or another about health care, Blanche Lincoln has provided exactly 0% of those people with a reason to vote for her. Ta-da! Joining us now is Chris Hayes, Washington editor of The Nation. Chris, it's nice to see you. Thanks for joining us.
Great to see you too, Rachel.
Do Senate Republicans have any chance of derailing the bill, given what we've heard about the meeting with the parliamentarian and everything else we know about the process at this point?
I think no. I mean, today they took their kind of procedural shot and they tried to rule some things out of order vis-a-vis budget reconciliation. They were shot down by the parliamentarian. The next steps are all amendments they want to propose. And basically, I think as long as, remember, amendments, because it's the Senate, they'd have to pass they'd have to get 60 votes. And so as long as Reid can hold together, 51 or even 50 Democratic senators, if that's what he needs to get rid of those amendments, there's not a whole lot they can do.
How long do you expect the overall process to take? One of the things Republicans have talked about is just trying to make the process take an interminably long time in the hopes that they win by wearing the other side down.
So my understanding, and again, this is like this gets pretty esoteric, but my understanding is there's a 20-hour clock that started running, either starts tonight or starts tomorrow, for the amendment proposing period. The people on the Senate that I've talked to seem to think it's going to happen Friday or Saturday and not extend much beyond that, given unless there's some surprise, unless the Republicans come up with some brilliant plan to win over Democratic votes on an amendment. But I think Friday or Saturday is the time frame.
Okay. On the issue of Blanche Lincoln, Ben Nelson also today saying that he would vote against reconciliation, which is remarkable because Ben Nelson is blamed for the Cornhusker Kickback. He will now explicitly vote against taking it out of the bill while still trying to disavow it. Do you understand the political logic behind what, say, Blanche Lincoln is doing? No. No, sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but no, I don't. Like you said, right, you've alienated everyone. It makes no sense. And it's going to be a polarized electorate, I think, in the fall, largely. And there's just going to be no way you're going to be able to go to anyone and say, hey, I remember that there was this super obscure process whereby after Scott Brown got elected, then they sent it back and there was this reconciliation sidecar. Remember the sidecar? Well, I voted against the sidecar. I mean, how are you going to explain that in ads? No one's going to care about that. It's going to be the totality of the bill that's going to either stand up or fall. That's going to be the thing that's going to be slugged out in ads and in the campaign. And the notion that you can hedge your bet on the downside by taking a no vote here seems really, really dubious to me. The Nation's Chris Hayes, always cutting right